Stacy, 5, 4, 3, 2. Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting, special meeting of June 29th, 2020. The hour being 7 p.m. I think we're ready to start. Before starting the official portion of the meeting, I would like to read the introduction for electronic meetings. As mayor of the Laconia City Council, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to Governor's Emergency Order, the Governor's Emergency Order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All council members have the ability to communicate during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to watch the live YouTube video at https://www.youtube.com/LaconiaNH. Listen to this meeting through dialing the following phone number, 1-646-558-8656, or participate by the Zoom app. Webinar ID 879-5197-8295, password 790-919. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the City of Laconia's website at www.laconianh.gov. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 524-3877 extension 249 or email at cityclerk@laconianh.gov. And D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance when each member states their presence. Also, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I would ask Deputy City Clerk Stacy Anders to call the roll, please.
Councilor Cheney.
Here and physically present.
Thank you. Councilor Bounds.
Councilor Bounds is occupied this evening.
Councilor Lippman.
Present.
And is
At
there anyone
home.
in the room with you?
At home with alone.
Thank you. Councilor Haynes.
Here, physically present.
Thank you. Councilor Hamel.
At my home and alone in this room.
Thank you. Councilor Felch.
Here and alone.
Thank you. Mayor Hosmer.
Present here in the City Council chambers.
Thank you.
I would ask before we start this evening that we have an opportunity to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask Councilor Cheney to lead us in that pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Cheney. Our recording secretary this evening is in fact Stacy Anders, who's Deputy City Clerk. Also joining us here in council chambers is City Manager Scott Myers, and Glenn Smith, the Finance Director. Under not line number 5 on our agenda for department presentations, we're going to start tonight with Library, who's going to present their budget this evening. Welcome, Randy Bro. And you're both doing it. Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Moriarty.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors. John Moriarty, Chairman of the Library Board of Trustees, joined this evening by Library Director Randy Bro. We're going to endeavor to do the shortest budget presentation ever tonight and leave you as much time as you would like to ask questions. So in many regards, not much has changed fiscally at the library since the last budget presentation. We do every year with a blank.
Excuse me, Mr. Moriarty, you are currently muted. You might maybe offer some assistance there. Thank you.
I might need some assistance here, actually. Oh, is that? Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. Did you just to quickly start over, endeavoring the shortest budget presentation ever. Leave you questions, time for questions. I'll identify myself, John Moriarty, Chairman of the Library Board of Trustees, joined by Director Randy Bro. Little has changed this fiscal presentation at the library from last year. We start each budget season with a blank piece of paper and try and find the shortest distance to operate the library in a way that keeps pace with the demands of the community. A couple of points that have shifted. You may notice that we are constantly trying to keep in balance the book buying, the physical book and physical media print aspect of it, as well as non-print. We've had great success over the last couple of years with our streaming services, New Hampshire downloadables. We're leveraging that into very cost-effective scenarios that in fact are saving the taxpayers some money and increasing usage from our patrons and citizens at the same time. It turned out that it was a really nice place to be, that we've made those changes prior to the SARS-CoV-2 situation, because it put us in a nice position to serve some of our patrons long distance. In addition to that, this is the end of the first year. We went live with our new library information system last July. Realized some fairly significant savings there, which we're hoping to defray, according to what we presented to you, some of the other mildly escalating lines, utilities and building maintenance, principally among them. So we kept our proposal under what guidelines we were given, and we are always vigilant about the bottom line to the taxpayers. And thank you for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moriarty and Mr. Bro. Looking at the counselors now, do you have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That might be the shortest budget presentation I've ever been present for. So
Excellent. Mission accomplished. Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Stay safe.
thanks very much, John. Thanks, Randy. Next up on 5B will be assessing with Stephen Hamilton from the Whitney Consultant Group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you can hear me all right.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I'm not going to be able to top that in terms of the brevity of my presentation, but I'll try. The assessing department is a relatively small department, but it has a lot of consequence attached to it. In terms of employees, we have 3 employees within the department, and then my company provides contracted assessing services, leading the department through a lot of changes this past year. And so we move into fiscal year 2021 with a slightly different profile in terms of our
I just lost you there.
Now you can see me. A slightly different profile in terms of the composition of the staff and the tasks that they're undertaking. So there are some small changes within the salary line of the budget. Otherwise, the form of the budget takes on a very similar presentation as in prior years. We continue to hope for some good support in terms of educational opportunities. There is money in here for conferences and some other professional development, which we know is going to be impacted this year, but we expect will be accomplished in a digital form, much like this meeting is taking place. And so we expect that some of the local conferences, the regional conferences, will be carried out in a digital format. We also understand that the nature of the training that we hope that our staff will be taking part in will also involve a lot less travel and a lot more digital involvement. And so for that reason, it's important for us to be able to count on the great support that the City Council has provided to the department through the years in terms of training. Other things which have changed a little bit, there's a little more money for postage, which we find ourselves sending an awful lot of letters over the last 3 months, and we expect that that probably will continue. To the extent that we can, we try to make every communication electronic or by telephone, but we have a lot of taxpayers that like the old-fashioned mail method. And so those are the highlights of the structure of the department and the structure of the budget. There has been an increase in value in the city from 2018 to 2019. There was about a 4.1% increase in the net taxable value of the city. We're just beginning the process now of trying to understand what the market value estimate will be for 2020. Preliminary indications are that there is some diminishment in the number of transactions in the early wake of the COVID-19 interruption to the economy, but that overall there doesn't appear to be a large impact on the median value of homes. And so the way that I've been preliminarily thinking about it is that this process has changed a lot of things, but it really hasn't done anything to correct the housing imbalance and the shortage of housing units in the market generally, but also within the city of Laconia specifically. And so whether there's going to be a significant impact on value is in the future to figure out right now. However diminished the capacity of my crystal ball was around about the middle of March, it failed me altogether. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the long term when it comes to the value of all property. I can give you a little report on the number of abatement requests that we received in 2019, which was dramatically lower than the prior years. We had 38 local abatement requests in 2018. The prior year, in 2019, excuse me, the prior year was 89 requests. In 2017, it was 60. In fact, at 38, that's about half of the average of the prior 4 years' number of abatements that were filed. We put a lot of effort into making sure that we understood the concerns of taxpayers on the front end, so that if there was a concern, we found a way to try and address it before the abatement process had to be realized by the taxpayer. And in many cases, we were able to understand the concerns of taxpayers and integrate it in to our valuations before the final bills were sent in December of, or due in December of 2019. So that's the long and the short of where we are. And I knew I wasn't going to do it as quickly as the library people were able to carry that out. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you might have any.
Stephen, you may not have been fast, but it was well done.
Thank you.
Looking at the counselors here for your questions. Counselor Cheney.
I think all of us have heard over the recent past from citizens about assessments that appear to be out of whack. Most recently, a property.
I'm sorry, Councilor Cheney, I seem to have lost your audio.
Now,
Yes.
I apologize profusely. I don't know if you heard what I said up to this point. A nod would be enough.
I heard very little.
Okay. I understand that an individual piece of property can go crazy like that one appears to have gone. But it does seem like there are a number of those in the course of a year. Are we making any effort to cut down on the number of times we see property sold for substantially different numbers than what they're assessed for, above what they're assessed for?
Counselor, it's an excellent question. The reality is that we have a real estate market which is completely unregulated and unfettered. And so the forces that of supply and demand, which act on a lot of property, especially some of the more valuable lakefront properties that we see, it's really difficult, especially without a crystal ball, to be able to know what the property might sell for ultimately. We do integrate those sales into the valuation for the coming year. And so we did that same exercise last year and increased pretty significantly a lot of the waterfront locations in response to the sales that are occurring. We're a little bit challenged by the timing of the sales that we analyze. We look at sales 1 year before April 1st of the tax year. So April 1st is the date of taxation. And so we look from April 1st of 2019 to April 1st of 2020 for those transactions to understand what the market value of property is and apply that to property. And so properties that sell after that may still be appreciating in value. And so there might be a trend towards higher value in some of the locations in some of the neighborhoods that it is a little bit difficult to try and predict. It's hard to hit a moving target sometimes. And then there's also the challenge of having a single date of taxation, and that is April 1st. We have to try to estimate the value of the property as it was physically on April 1st of any given year. And one thing that I've learned from just watching HGTV with Mrs. Hamilton is that when it's time to sell, frequently people do an awful lot of work on the property. And so we don't always have the ability to understand what the exact physical condition was until we look at the property after it has sold. And then even if the property had changed, we can't change the value up until the next April 1st comes around, unless we know that that was the condition on April 1st. So those are the challenges. it makes it a fun and interesting profession, but it certainly does present a lot of different challenges in the valuation of that property. But we look at those very carefully, and we focus on that class of property pretty carefully, because we need to make sure that the system and the formulas that we derive have a way to treat all taxpayers with equity, whether they're at the high end of the spectrum or at the low end of the spectrum. And so that vertical equity is what we refer to it, is very important with the way that we set up our calculations. And I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cheney. Any other questions from councilors?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Littman.
Yes, just sort of to add on to what Councilor Cheney was speaking to. I wonder if Steve could speak to the DRA's assessment of our values and how we're faring in the scoring that they do of municipalities in that respect.
So thank you, Counselor, and that's an excellent question. We continue to meet all of the standards which are laid out by the New Hampshire Assessing Standards Board for the level of assessment, the dispersion of those assessments. We refer to that as the COD, the coefficient of dispersion, which needs to be under 20. And also the measure of that vertical equity, which is the price-related differential, or PRD. And we meet those performance standards. The city has been on an annual basis for a long time. We met them last year. We anticipate meeting them again this year. And that's why it's really important to us to make sure that we focus on the equity, not just for what it means to the individual taxpayers and understanding how much of the tax burden they're sharing, but also to make sure that the rest of the state, including the Department of Revenue and the Assessing Standards Board, can see the effort that the city is putting towards making sure the assessments are fair and equitable.
So based on that, in terms of the properties that you have to, if you will, wait a time period to get in, what percent of the valuation would you estimate we're having a delay in, and it's having any material consequence on the overall tax rate set for the city? What is sort of the, if you will, try to give the public some sense of the fact that, yes, we are restricted in terms of when we can take things into consideration, but the, if you will, the outlier properties, what percent of the valuation do you think that constitutes?
So overall, the value of the city is about, last year was about $2.3 billion. And those outliers, while they're glaring and they're pretty impressive when you look at them individually, in the big picture, they represent a relatively few properties that are right along, especially the big lake. And so, you know, we all know how many properties there are along that stretch of the big lake. It really doesn't add up to a very large number. And so as a percentage of the tax base, it really isn't that impactful. It does, it figures into the overall value, but in terms of whether or not that value is accurate and whether the tax rate is shared on a value which is fair and equitable, we believe it is, even though there are some anomalies, some outliers, but also some parts of the market that we just can't keep up with because the buyers and sellers recognize value at a growth rate which is pretty impressive, to say the least.
And from your experience, we're in a certain market where there's one direction going up, but in your experience looking at markets that are working differently, you have the same issue going in the other direction where prices are held up higher than what the sales are. Is that also true?
Yeah, so we love to talk about value when values are going up, but they don't always go up. And if we look back about 11 or 12 years ago to the 2008, 2009 timeframe, we can see a lot of places where value fell precipitously in the financial crisis. And so that lag can also happen because we're still locked into the 1 year time frame to think about the sales that occur. And so if values are going down and you have to take that snapshot on April 1st, then there will be a further decline in value if values are declining. But everything has to be based on that April 1st and how it balances across the entire spectrum.
Mayor, if I could ask one question.
Please do, Counselor.
In terms of the arriving at April 1st, can you give some sort of historical basis? I know you used to work for DRA, so how that was arrived at and sort of the, if you will, maybe the legislative and policy history of picking this kind of approach.
Counselor, it's an excellent question, and you can get me going on history for a long time. Suffice it to say that the concept of the beginning of March for town activities, including town meetings, goes back to England. I mean, it goes back to before we were even colonized. The idea of running municipal government in a way that brought people together in the spring was an important feature then. I've been told by some of the old Yankees that I've learned a lot of this particular profession from, that March 1st was important in the ability to inventory and value the property that was really critical back in the colonial days. And that was not real estate, it was livestock. Because most of the taxation in New Hampshire was driven by the taxation of livestock back in the 18th and into the 19th centuries. In fact, the requirement that we have this 5-year revaluation in the Constitution was brought about, remember, by the people when the legislature was found to have the potential to make mischief with the valuation of different types of livestock, and whether you were valuing cows or sheep or horses, and what sequence you did that revaluation could impact the balance of taxation across the state. And so this April 1st date is a really convenient date because it falls in the middle of mud season. If you're going to be trying to keep track of whose livestock is where, mud season is a really opportune time to do that, because it's hard to hide the tracks of your herd if you've moved them into your neighbor's pasture. But that's the most that I know about why it's April 1st. Other states, other taxing jurisdictions have a different date. Some have it on January 1st. Some of the newer states do it on January 1st. Some states do an apportionment of value for property if it changes through the tax year. That hasn't been the case in New Hampshire, with the exception of one or two examples. One is a property that might burn unintentionally during the tax year can receive a prorated assessment for the portion of the tax year it was available. That was a relatively recent change to the law that was brought about, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. And interestingly, in Laconia, we've We've used that, I think, twice or maybe 3 times already this year, unfortunately. Hopefully, there'll be no other structure fires that damage properties between now and the end of the tax year. But if there are, then that can be prorated.
Very good. Thank you. I'm all set, Mayor. Thank you.
Counselor Hamel.
Thank you. Just curious, Stephen, on your opinion on the overall buildings in Laconia, not just lakefront, but South End, everywhere in Laconia. Or do you feel that there's a increase in value on most homes, or what range do you see the most besides lakefront?
Well, based on the activity that we saw in the 6 months after April 1st last year, because we know that the DRA's performance measurement happens over a 1-year period that's 6 months out of cycle from what we value the property. So they look at sales that are 6 months before and then 6 months after April 1st. And that led to a lower ratio, median ratio, than we anticipated. That's a good indication that the market values continued to increase after April 1st of last year. Anecdotally, because I don't have the statistics to back it up, my hunch is that we're continuing in that direction towards overall higher values across the city. To what extent and how that balances out, that's yet to be determined.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor Hamel. Any other questions from the counselors? Seeing none, thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate you and your presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always a pleasure. Your council always has wonderful questions. I want to say a quick word of thank you to Emily Goldstein of my staff, who's on the call, who helped me to prepare for the meeting tonight. And thank you all.
Take care. Thanks. Next up is for a budget presentation is Parks, Recreation and Facilities, Amy Lovisek, the director. Welcome, Amy.
Hi there. Let me
Hi.
Start my video here. Hi. Okay. So I think I'm going to have or I should have a PowerPoint that Glenn will bring up. I also have Tim Ford that should be here as well. Yes. Excellent. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councilors, for having me here. I will try and make this as brief as I can. I know you have a lot to do tonight, so I will be brief. We had a great year this year, and we did quite a bit of new and interesting things at the parks, and I will go over those, and then I will talk to you about things that we plan on doing, what are in the works, actually, what's happening, and then go over what some of our changes are as far as our budget goes. So on page 121 of your packet, you have our Recreation Facilities Department activities of what it is we do in this department. And some of those, I won't go over them all because, of course, they, Glenn, can you change the screen to the next one? Thank you. There's obviously many, but I'll highlight the major ones. We maintain 20 parks year round. Sorry about that. Mowing approximately 28.5 acres weekly, multiple ball fields, athletic fields, courts, buildings, 9 playgrounds, 9 cemeteries, 5 beaches. We have 18 different irrigation systems, 23 bathrooms that we clean daily starting this past Saturday when the beaches opened. 30 areas that have plant beds, and 20 other areas that we mow on a regular weekly basis. We maintain the ice rinks, the sledding hill. We remove the snow and ice from 10 parking lots, 21 walkways, and 26 doors. We're also involved with the setup and breakdown of Christmas Village. Next. So COVID-19 obviously changed our way of life here. Our department saw a complete drop off of all programs. There wasn't anything happening. We had closed our community center, our playgrounds, our courts, ball fields, all for safety. We have canceled the Opeachy Day Camp, which was very unfortunate. And we have altered the capacity level for Weirs Beach to 400. We recently reopened the playgrounds, the ball fields, and the courts with some guidelines. And baseball has started to take over with that, so that's great news. But what we've realized in this pandemic is that it has shown the importance of our parks to our community. They're no longer being taken for granted. They're vital and healthy, vital to the health of our community. Next page. So in the white, you'll see this is on page 122 of your packet. This was our goals for this upcoming year. However, things obviously changed because of the pandemic. Our new goal is actually to get the parks, facilities, and programs up and running with consideration to our new normal way of life. So things will be different, but we're getting there. And as of Wednesday of this week, I believe, the community center will be reopening with also some new stipulations and guidelines. Next. So some of the things that we've gotten done this year. Next. We have finished the Bond Beach and the Bartlett Beach erosion control renovations. Both are fantastic, and both now have the ability through New Hampshire DES to actually get some new sand in there and revitalize the sand because we've taken care of the erosion. But both look wonderful, and they're great projects, and they are complete and ready for the summer season. Next. We did a couple of park house entries. The Levitt Park, it looks pretty much exactly the same as it did before. However, it's obviously much stronger. It's built differently, but it's more secure and structurally sound. The Weirs Community Center, which is what you helped me fund last year, it's safer, it's ADA compliant, and it looks great. Next. The community center roof got repaired. Next. The Perley Oak was pruned. Next. We had some upgrades to the police department. They had a new blacktop put down in their parking lot and new carpeting put in, which again, I thank you for. Next. And we've got our new logo. Just thought we would try something new in the department, and we just thought this one looked the best. So I hope you like it.
It's a great logo, Amy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Next. So projects that are currently in the works. Next. It's not the best picture in the world. These are the Weirs Beach renovations. They are happening now. Over the weekend, we had the flooring finished, and they are installing all the bathroom partitions right now. All right, probably not right now, but they were there today, and they'll be there tomorrow, and they're pushing to get this done as of this week, so we can have the building inspector come in to check us out and make sure we're open for the 4th. Next. The Perley Pond Conservation Area renovation. We're currently awaiting the New Hampshire DES to approve our shoreland and wetland permits for the project. Once we get those, we'll figure out funding for this project to be approved. Next. Robbie Mills safety netting. Unfortunately, we have put this out twice for RFP, and both times it has come back with no responses. I was told by one company at least that it was because of the COVID and they didn't have the staffing. So hopefully that is the actual reason. And now that things are starting to pick back up, we can put it back out to RFP and get a better outcome. So we'll keep trying. Next. The playground equipment repairs. We have a number of things that we are repairing. This one doesn't have its apparatus. We are putting in new mulch, new playground mulch. It's not complete for what we need for playground mulch, but it's what we had the money for. So we are paying the mulch and some of the parts are with the playground equipment funds that you gave us through the CIP this year and last year. So those will be done this year. Next. So we have started our self-assessment again for the ADA. And we have started with these two buildings here, the Tardif Park House and the community center. What we've been doing is in our self-assessment, when we can correct anything, that is exactly what we're doing through our operating budget. We have almost completely finished Tardif Park. It has a new ADA door with the push button so you can get in. We have to work on the ramp to get up. There are a couple of issues with the ramp, but after that, it's completely done. We've altered the bathrooms, we've altered the kitchen area, all to make room and make sure it's compliant, and it's wonderful. The community center is almost complete as well. We did do a renovation to one of the bathrooms, and we will be working on the second one this coming year. But we're going to keep going on that. Next. So the skate park is kind of up in the air. We had a meeting planned and actually had quite a few people planning on coming to this meeting to just develop where they want it, what they want to see, how they want it. You know, because I just don't, it's not my sport. So I need to talk to the people that it is their sport. So we had a meeting planned, and then again, COVID struck and I had to cancel the meeting twice because we thought COVID was temporary. I don't know why. But so we've postponed it indefinitely until I can have those numbers. So hopefully soon I can get those guys in here and we can have a conversation. Maybe we'll just use the entire gym and I can keep it all separate, but we're going to try and push forward with that as well. Next. The Bond Beach bathhouse and septic design is going out for RFP shortly. Next. So it sounds strange, but I only have one CIP project for this year. And it is on page 13 of your packet. But it's just the half-ton 4x2 pickup truck that is replacing 317. 317 is currently sitting dead in my backyard over here. So it's in need of replacement. Next. So on page 119 of your packet is our budget breakdown. We did do a 1.8 increase, which was the suggested number. And we have made some minor changes in our budget, new line items, that type of things that I would like to point out to you. Next. So after having a meeting with between Tim Ford, my foreman, and Councillor Hamill, Councillor Hamill was asking us to put into our budget presentation what it takes to do grounds maintenance. All the different types of areas that we spend money in this. He asked me to break it down, what we are spending currently and what the desired spending amount would be. And that is what you're going to see in these next few slides. So I do have Tim Ford. If you have any questions, we can bring him on later. He's my guru. So soil amendments, it's the fertilizer, the seed, the compost, other minerals, and the soil samples. You can see that we spend a good bit of money on those, but it's not nearly what we need in order to keep the weeds and all of the other things that basically anything we don't want other than grass, whether it be clover or crabgrass or whatever it might be. But these are the things that are going to keep those away. So when we read the soil sample, we take the soil sample in November. Tim then gets it back and reads what the soil actually needs. He analyzes it. He then determines what we have to put into the soil to make it almost perfect. And if we were to put in everything that we're supposed to and what it needed, we would have fantastic grass at all times, and doing it when it needs it. So I'm just giving you that heads up. Next. We also have cultural mulch and certified playground mulch. I mentioned the certified playground mulch earlier. This year we spent $9,000 out of this account. $5,000 of it came out of the playground equipment line. So that left the $4,000 left in the current budget line. What is desired is $21,000, just a little over $21,000, but it would only be for a 1-year thing. What we have to do is we have to get our mulch levels to a certain point at each playground. And it has to be there. And at that point, once we get it to that level, we can maintain and all will be well. And we don't need to be at that level anymore. Next. Plantings, we do a lot of plantings. We do the planters downtown. We have a number of beds, like I mentioned earlier. We have 30 different beds. Some are adopted through Adopt-A-Spots, but a lot of them are not. And so that leaves it up to us and our department to put them in. We've spent $7 this year on plants. And then depending on the year, if the winter's harsh on them and kills them off, or might get hit by a snowplow, or just might have gotten taken. So we don't really necessarily see it going down because we do 2 different types each year and all that good stuff. But we are doing our best with the perennials. Next. Here are just some extra things that we do in the maintenance ground account. The irrigation supplies for the 18 irrigations that we do. These are literally just things that break over a winter, and we spend every year. Flags would go down because we purchase flags every year for the multiple poles that we do have. However, this year I bought the solar powered lights that go underneath to shine up on the light on the poles on the flags so that they are properly displayed. Tree removal, pruning and planting, that's going to be moved. That's one of the new things in our budget. It's going to be moved to a new line. But as you can see, what I'm asking is, or what we spent this year was $2,800. However, we would need about $10,000 in order to take the trees down that we know are needed to be taken down, and then to replant and have the soil amendments that go with them. Picnic table replacements, that's an every year kind of a thing. Ice melt and salt, roughly the same. Field chalk and paint with the Turfus and the quick dry. That's a significant change because this year we didn't have the baseball season. We didn't have the lacrosse season. We didn't have field hockey. Well, we had the field hockey, but we had other things that didn't happen. We didn't have the Lakes Region softball. So we didn't have a lot of the things we normally would have paid for. So it would have been a lot higher on our current number. But that's what we spent this year so far. So that was fall and a little bit of what we're just now getting with the baseball. And then unexpected repairs for when somebody runs into a light pole and nobody catches them or anything like that. What I'd like to do next year, hopefully, is to get these, some of these lines separated throughout the budget to just show what it is we're purchasing with that, so that you have more control over that. Next. So in the fiscal year 20, we have a $55,000 budget. Fiscal year 21 coming up right now is 57. I'm sorry, I didn't put that in there. And what's desired, if I added all those things up, is 127. So it's about $70,000 difference. It's not something I'm asking the council for right now, but I just wanted you aware of the things that we do have to do in order to get everything done. And therefore, with the limited budget, it makes it so some things fall to the wayside and we get what we can and we do our best to get those things. However, it doesn't always get everything we want taken care of, like the fields. And I know that's a significant thing for a lot of people, because I mean, the parks they're the draw. People want to be at our parks, and it's why you would buy a house in Laconia, and it's why you would we get compliments all the time about our facilities, so we want to keep that going. We don't want to lose our fan base, if you will. But if we have all of this, we'd also need manpower to get it done. Next. So we also increased the conference and dues. I just want to promote the industry knowledge as it's constantly changing in our department. Things are, it might sound like a simple job, but it is certainly not. It has quite a number of fluid parts to it. So we have to keep going with our knowledge on that one. Next. Mr. Mayor, there you are. So this is our new tree program line. Basically what it is that, and it's described on page 125 of your packet if you care to follow along. But I did take the money from the outside contracts. I did not, even though I wrote I did not take it from the maintenance grounds account. This line is specific for tree removal, tree planting, and soil amendments. Next. That is what I have for the parks side of things. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Amy, for your presentation. I can't see everyone quite yet, but when I do, if I see your hands up, we can call on you. Any questions for the director? Mark Haynes, Councilor Haynes.
Amy, when you talk about additional manpower.
You're muted.
There you go.
Nope.
Still muted.
One more time.
Okay, it says unmuted.
There you go.
Oh, okay. When you talk about additional labor in the future, what are your thoughts about?
So my thought, if I were to have the ability, if you all gave us the amount we're asking for in soil amendments, just soil amendments, I would need somebody who in the spring is doing irrigations getting those up and running, getting the bathhouses up and running, getting the ball fields up and running, and then doing fertilizing, aerating, seeding, and all of that. And right now I have one person who does that. All of those tasks are one person. So I would, if possible, I mean, obviously it's not I'm just throwing out the need.
Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Yes, Amy. Have you ever considered that maybe some of this stuff is, could be outsourced?
It could be.
I mean, I think, when you start talking about manpower, you start talking about benefits and that type of stuff. And, some of these things, I think, at least it'd be interesting to look into, could be outsourced.
I could look into it.
Okay.
Would you mind if I kept it organic? When I look at that?
I think, if results are somewhat comparable, one particular year I noticed that especially Opeechee, the grounds looked fantastic. And then the following year, the weeds started taking over again. So especially the clover. So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay.
Amy, I'm following up on Councilor Haynes' request. I think it maybe would be a good idea to compare the organic and the alternative that would not be organic, whatever it would be, more non-organic. But maybe we could take a look at both proposals for the same level of work, because I do tend to agree with you. Our fields have been some of the best, if not the best, in the state. And I think you're absolutely right. There's nothing like rolling into the city on a fall evening or in the summer when the lights are on the fields, see the people out there and see how great the fields look. I think it is a definite draw to our city. So now that we've made the investment, we would not, we need to maintain that investment in those fields as well. So maybe we can take a look at a couple different options, organic, non-organic. And if you are perhaps produce something for us here, if we were to fully fund your grounds maintenance, would you be looking to hire a full-time groundskeeper and approximately what the total cost of that person might be? So we can figure that all in when we look at it. Okay.
I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from the councilors?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Littman, yes.
Amy, thank you. Got a couple of questions I'd like to ask in terms of, I know we had some early problems with getting a response on the watering system there. Was that fully resolved, or is that still an open issue?
I'm sorry, what system?
The sprinkler system, that there was a period of time where we lost some of our green due to burn. Has that issue been resolved fully?
It has.
Okay. Another question, in terms of the impact of closing Opeechee services. I know Manchester had taken a look at canceling everything and then came back and made some adjustments to open up some recreation for children. Is there any option for us to do something in terms of at least providing some additional recreational opportunities, even though we can't run a camp?
Well, we've opened everything back up, so all aspects of our parks are open. We've even put the basketball courts back, well, the rims back up, so those are available for recreation. The tennis courts are there, everything is there. You're looking for actual programs for these kids?
Well, as an example, would swim lessons be a possibility at one of our lakefront situation to provide some opportunity, given kind of where the state is in the opening? I understand why the full Opeechee camp isn't possible to provide, but I was wondering if you could take that back in terms of there's something we could do in the summer here.
I would love to offer swim lessons. It's been probably 3 years since we've been able to find anyone who is able to actually offer the lessons. You have to be not just a lifeguard, but you have to be a WSI instructor. So that's a water safety instructor. And in order to be trained for that and then actually train the children in the lessons, you have to be touching them. You actually have to have physical contact while you're holding the child as they're kicking, and you're holding their back as they're floating. So that it's very difficult to have any sort of physical social distance.
So just use swimming as an example.
I understand.
Maybe it's
I will-
tennis. Yep.
I'm more
Something.
than happy to look into what we can do.
So now just sort of circling back into sort of budget questions, is there any expectation based on the COVID situation where we're going to have a return to surplus of some spending within the budget, and could some of that be carried forward to help address some of the expenses that you'd like to go forward with in 2021?
I have asked for some rollovers. Is that what you're asking?
It's yes, in part. I guess is maybe the manager may need to jump in and help answer this question. But I guess in terms of the dollars that are missing from what you were able to get in your budget versus what you desire, what might be available based on what we had to scale back from the COVID period that could be brought forward into the 2021 period. I don't know if Scott, you want to add something here or comment?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor. So yes, we have done some of that already with a couple of small projects that Amy brought forward, and we are utilizing some funds that we haven't expended for some seasonal staff just because we've had challenges in hiring and or lifeguards. Again, we had 4 people ready to go for the certification for lifeguards, and we were planning, I believe, on having 5 lifeguards, which would at least allow us to staff Weirs Beach with 2 on a rotating basis. And again, there wasn't the opportunity for pools to be open and that training to occur. So we have used some of those funds for a couple of small things to take advantage of those funds being available, for this year. And there are some carry forwards in the parks program as well.
Another question or another comment and question is, I think the mayor and had brought up the point that we made an investment in the fields, and we did make some very large investments in all of the grounds in the recent park renovations. But I wonder, in terms of from our project account, non-capital reserve, is there equipment or some other way that we can substitute some spending from a reserve source to tackle a couple of these projects? I think we need to be cautious given the overall economic situation that the state and the city face, and the country for that matter. But I guess I'm wondering whether some of the projects could be undertaken using non-capital reserve funds, and that would free up some operating funds to be able to also address some issues.
That's absolutely an option. I think we've already used some of those funds, some of the impact fees as well that we brought to you to try to jumpstart a few of the projects this spring. And that was supposed to include the netting at Robbie Mills that Amy mentioned, also netting or a solution of some kind for balls leaving Memorial Park and going into people's houses. We jumpstarted the Weirs Bath with some funds, and bathhouse with some funds. That project got delayed just because some of the components were unable to ship. So similar to what we happened with the bridge down there. And that's why the project is hopefully done on Thursday of this week. But in doing that, we also ran into a mold issue, I believe, down there that caused some additional remediation. So in order to keep that project on track, we did use some of the temporary salaries items and things that didn't happen because of COVID for that. So we have been trying to be smart, take advantage of the timing of opportunities right now. I think the council's put a lot of money into irrigation over the years at Memorial Park, baseball and softball, as well as at Wyatt Park. And there was some dedicated funds, a few thousand left for some dedicated equipment that came from that Wyatt Park House Association to do something there as well. And then the centralized irrigation. So I think we've made some good investments. And then also, like Amy pointed out, the two of the local beaches, as well as a couple of the park houses. So we'll continue to look, and we'll try, and we have already taken advantage of some of the things that you're speaking of about trying to capture funds now that weren't used possibly for COVID things, and helping jumpstart or fast track things that we may not have been able to do otherwise.
I guess finally, I agree with Councillor Haynes with respect to if we're going to look at some resources of the humankind, that we do it on an outsourced basis, so that we don't end up with a cost structure that we can't support. But it would seem to me the fields have been our biggest investment, and it seems like we are variable between year to year how good we were able to sustain those. And I was just looking back at the history of the parks budget, going back to not counting the salaries area, but just looking at the other expenses. We're actually spending less in this proposed budget than we did in 16-17 actual. So I do think that given what's been going on and all that we're trying to do and cultivating that asset, that's something I think as a council we should take a look at. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hamel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a comment. I've been the Parks and Recs liaison for a long time now, although I missed quite a few of the meetings presently, probably because of COVID. But I just want to say that I believe that Parks and Rec for a long time has been underfunded and undermanned. When you look at that list that Amy provided on what they do, it's just amazing how they get through the year and all the things that they have to do every day, every week with a small crew to get that done. It's a lot of mowing, it's a lot of fertilizing, it's a lot of everything. And I just think that they do an amazing job, and I want to thank them for what they do. But I have to also agree with Henry and Mark that, our fields from year to year probably hasn't looked the best as they should. And I think this is one of the years there's an awful lot of clover and dandelions out on the fields. And, if that takes root, which it has, then the grass is jeopardized. So I think, I think we need to look to increase their budget, especially in fertilizer and weed control. I don't know the organic part of it. I'm not a specialist in that kind of stuff, but on my lawn, when the weeds start growing, the weed control goes down, and you got to get rid of it. But hopefully the irrigation will get solved here. I don't know if the computerized system is up and running yet. That's been a little bit of a time now that we've been looking to have that happen, where they can control it from the community center. I believe all the systems are up and running as far as the new ones we just installed within the last year or so. But, I think we need to really scrutinize their budget and look to see what we can do to add to it as far as, ground equipment and the fertilizers and seed and all that kind of stuff. It's really needed. And, I hope we can do it through this budget process. I think we can find some areas where we can put some money into it. We have some one-time funds, maybe we could help them this year and then rely on Scott maybe to increase the budget a little bit next year for them. But I just want to commend Amy and her whole crew for what they do to keep everything looking good. They work hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamel. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I think we're ready to move on. Thank you again, Amy.
Thank you. I appreciate everything.
Thank you,
I just
Amy.
want to say thank you to my crew as well. Obviously, I couldn't do it all for sure. They're amazing, and I just want to send out some kudos to them. So thank you all.
Moving on to 5D of the department budget presentations, Planning, Code, and Conservation Commission. Dean Trefethen, Director of Planning and Community Development. Welcome, Dean.
Sorry. Okay. How's that? Okay. Good evening, councilors and Mr. Mayor. Move this back just a little bit, I think here. Or I move back, either one. I'll be covering planning, code, and conservation this evening. I'm going to start with code enforcement. On the budget books, it's page 43 through 47. Proposed budget is $173,432, a little less than last year, due to some kind of rearrangements of salaries. Code enforcement has 3 full-time employees, not including myself. Code department does permits for building permits, electrical, demolition, occupancy permits, and a scattering of a few other permits. We conduct almost 1,000 inspections per year. A typical building permit will require multiple inspections, foundation inspection, framing inspection, insulation inspection, those kinds, and then sheetrock, and then when you get into the electrical, there's the ref wiring and then the finish wiring. We also support the Heritage Commission and the Building Code Board of Appeals. We also have property maintenance code enforcement. We, over the past year, we upgraded one of our positions from a part-time position to a full-time position and upgraded it to be a housing inspector. We were looking to do more property maintenance inspections in terms of drive-bys and those kinds of things. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's been a little difficult. We've had one of our employees has been out on furlough for most of the time that since like mid-March, and that will continue for a little while. So that does kind of put a crimp on going out and doing not building permit inspections, but property maintenance inspections. We need to have somebody in the office to handle the people coming in. Even when City Hall was closed, we still had a number of people that were dropping off permits and picking them up and those kinds of things. So it was still been pretty busy. But for property maintenance, we do inspect properties by complaint or by drive-by, and we have various methods of enforcement. We send out letters, usually through certified mail, violations, and sometimes advisory, and of course, we can also take people to court. The housing inspector is also going to be responsible for the short-term lodging inspections. And for this calendar year so far, we have received 31 applications for permits for short-term rentals. Several of them have or will go to Zoning Board of Adjustment for special exception criteria first, but about 75% of them so far have been in the commercial resort or the shorefront residential zones that do allow it anyway. We suspect, just by looking at things online, that there are many other units of housing that are conducting short-term rentals that do not have a permit, have not applied for a permit. And particularly now that things have opened up, we are starting to get complaints from neighbors that this activity is going on, and we are following up with enforcement for those properties. So I think the numbers are going to continue to go up. Any questions on code enforcement before I move on?
Seeing none.
Nope. Okay. Move along to conservation. Budget is $4,500, which is the same as it's been for the 2 previous years. Don't let the size of the budget fool you, though. There's a lot going on with conservation. This budget primarily supports the Conservation Commission and their activities. We have a very dedicated group of volunteers that man the commission and then also do a number of activities on a volunteer basis. Primary functions of the Conservation Commission is to advise the planning department and some other city departments as some things go on. DPW works with Conservation Commission on a regular basis. Primary goal is stormwater management and wetlands protection to protect our 3 lakes that are within the city's boundaries and their tributaries. They do erosion control advice and inspections. The conservation technician, which is a full-time position, is included in the planning department's budget. So we'll get to that in a moment. As you know, the city has in its budget money for milfoil control, but we also receive grants, and there is a group that does fundraising. We are working on enhancing the property on the Pickle Pond Road that we bought last year. There's a couple of old shacks, really, but they're buildings that unfortunately, a couple of them have a little bit of lead paint in them and a couple of building materials that contain asbestos. So we're going to have those remediated, and then we'll be demolishing them. And as you know, we had a donation of land off of Hilliard Road next to the Paugus Bay State Forest that the Conservation Commission arranged for. Any questions on conservation?
Seeing no questions, Dean, go right ahead.
Okay.
Quick question there.
Sorry about that, Counselor.
In terms of the funding that we put aside for current use for future properties, what's the status of that?
We used quite a bit of it in fiscal year 20 to buy the Pickle Pond property, but there is still some money there, and I'm not sure the status of that. I think the city manager might know.
No, I was going to say we used a good chunk of it for the Pickle Pond property. So whatever we're rolling in this year to replenish it, it is capped at $250,000. So anytime it's been capped at $250,000, then the remaining dollars that might have potentially gone there roll into the general fund. So now any dollars that are available will go back to replenish that account.
So
we think there's around 25,000 in there right now, just in a ballpark.
So, and we roughly per year would estimate the current use coming in?
Yeah, I think we presented a chart when we were looking at this purchase. I think it was the first purchase that's happened in quite a number of years out of that fund. So the dollars that could have gone there, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but there's a little bit of fluctuation there. Some years it might have been in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range. In other years might have been 100 and something thousand going in. So it wasn't necessarily kind of a straight line chart to it, but we can pull that up and share it with the council again.
Thank you.
Okay, continue on, Dean. There seem to be no other questions.
All right. Planning and community development, which is pages 84 through 90 in the budget book. Proposed budget is a little over $335,000. This is 5 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. Again, we have had staff out because of the COVID on furlough, which will continue for a little while longer in the planning department's case. Although I don't believe it has impacted our activities so far. Planning department supports the various boards and commissions, planning, zoning, conservation, which I talked about, technical review, minor site plan, the special events and motorcycle week, and we will also be supporting the Historic District Commission when that gets up and running. We advise property owners about regulations concerning zoning, density, signs, etc. Looking at potential development or redevelopment opportunities. We have been involved very heavily with the state commission that is in charge of trying to redevelop the former state school property. We are in the process of implementing recommendations that were covered in the 2018 master plan. As you know, we created a new downtown commercial zone. We've also instituted a few other changes that were covered in that 2018 master plan. We've had some activity on the performance zoning that was introduced, and an example of that, which as it turned out did not need performance zoning, but when they started the process they thought they did, and is the redevelopment of the Barton's Motel. I know that there are, understandably so, some members in the community that are sad to see the motel go, and maybe not particularly like what's being proposed as its replacement. But they came in under performance zoning, and then we worked with them, and they adjusted their plans a little bit and moved things around. And as it turns out, they didn't need performance zoning. However, we have used performance zoning on the refurbishment of the Opera House in Lakeport, which is a mixed use, going to be a mixed use structure. We have offices and restaurants on the first floor. They are going to refurbish the Opera House part of it, and then the upper floors will be condos. Is our understanding that the same developer, Mr. Everett, is looking at another sizable piece of property in the Lakeport area, not right in the square, but very close to it, that will definitely be using performance zoning for their plans for that property. We've also been working the short-term rental issue. As I mentioned, we have had over 30 applications for permits. We know that there are many more than that out there. When we go onto sites like Airbnb or the RBO and just type in search Laconia, we come up with 100, 150 to sometimes 200 different properties that are listed. I will say that some of those properties are not short-term rentals from the way that we consider them, that they're hotels and those kinds of things, timeshare, a couple of timeshare resorts. They're just using them as a marketing, it's another marketing way for them to get people into the building. But nonetheless, there are probably a significant number of people who are doing it that do not have permits. We As I said, the number of people calling in asking about it and then also complaining about it has been on the uptick over the past few weeks now that the governor's orders on COVID have kind of loosened things up and people are able to start doing this a little more readily available. We have looked at a couple of vendors that offer services for enforcement. They're not cheap, but we need to look at if we can generate a significant number of additional permits and or also identify an additional number of places that are doing short-term rental that perhaps should not be because they don't meet the criteria, that this expenditure may be worth it. What these companies do is they basically search the internet and do a graphic comparison, pictures and other descriptions. And they keep comparing, and then they can whittle it down to specific properties. It's kind of interesting, kind of neat that they can do it. They all have shown us examples of how they do that, and it's pretty conclusive and to the point where the end result usually is a picture of a bedroom or something like that inside the structure that gets sent out to the owner so that they know, yeah, we know it's you. There's no question in their mind that it's you. They can see the picture, and so it's kind of neat. So we're evaluating that, and we haven't made any decisions yet, but it's an issue that certainly that we're working. And in addition to that, we have some additional chapters of the master plan that we have been working on inside with staff. There were 2 or 3 chapters that got started a few years ago that we've been looking at and editing and thinking about how do we make them conform to the vision and the land use chapter that we did pass a couple of years ago. And so they're very good head starts, but they're by no means a complete chapter. One of the chapters was done about 4 years ago now. It was the economic chapter. It was very verbose. The biggest problem I think that we would have trying to adapt that document at this point in time is that with the 2020 census in process right now, there's going to be a significant amount of economic data update that's going to come out of that in the next 9 to 12 months that would probably be more pertinent than what was available, say, 4 years ago. But we are working on the other chapters, and we'll be bringing them to the planning board for their consideration. So that's basically it on planning. Any questions from anyone?
Dean, I see no indication of a question or a comment from counselors.
All right. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continuing on to 5E on the agenda for a department budget presentation, finance. We'll do the first up with Director Glenn Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. And with your permission, I will give my presentation. Yeah, that's better. from here back at the table. So safely socially distanced. As Dean just did, I'm going to run through the budget book here and touch on the major areas of finance and hopefully answer all of your questions. The first section would be on page 52 and 53, where you see the budget for the fiscal office. And I'll say right now, we're pretty much what I would call in a hold the line budget there. There are the contractual changes in the salary line item. The operating budget is actually is down a little bit. Just want to let you know those, when you look at these numbers, what you're looking at here are the functions of the fiscal office. So we're looking at the processing of payroll. These are the items that are included in those numbers. Processing of all the city payables, dealing with many of the miscellaneous receivables of the city, all the trust fund accounts, managing the internal service fund, the enterprise funds, and all special revenues funds are coordinated through this budget. We work with the auditors to make sure that we get a good clean audit each year. We coordinate the financial report and work with DRA and with Scott and with you on the setting of the tax rate. Also included in this, which may not come immediately up to the top because we call it finance, but it also does include the city's HR function, any recruitment, management of contracts, management of benefits, along those lines. Tax collection is included in this budget, as is the salary side of IT. We'll get to the other side of IT later, but that's all on this budget that's on page 53. If there are no questions, we can move on to page 57, where we have the employee benefits for those departments other than what I like to call the big three, police, fire, and public works, where these benefits are budgeted separately. And most of these, of course, are tied directly off of the salaries. Health benefits include a 7.36% increase, which was presented to us by NHTI, our health benefit provider. Under Scott's direction and his guidance, we did solicit some additional bids for that this year, and fiscally it made sense to stay with NHTI. Just do want to point out that as in that number, we have citywide a total of 48 employees, about 38% of all eligible employees who have opted out of our health benefit program, to a very significant savings to the city. And I'll say that 38% is a very robust number in that regard. And I think we're doing good with that. If there are no questions, then I'll move on to page 59, where you see our other insurances. And there's not a lot to say about these, as we have, of course, a long time relationship with Primex, and these are the numbers as quoted to Primex. I will say most of these insurances are the full cost is split between the general fund, is what you see here, and also sanitary sewer fund, water department. Each department pays its own way on that. You'll see a claims number of $6,000. I just kind of want to bring to your attention right now, the actual claims as of today is $89,000 against the city. Of that, $86,000 is covered by insurance. So this is actually our deductibles and such for all claims against the city. As we see it here right now, that's about $3,500 this year. So we're doing a good job on that. And the budget amount of $6,000, I think, is a good number to get us through. The next part of finance is the general fund revenues, which I know Scott is going to touch on in detail in his report. So I'm not going to. So there you go. Moving on to page 63, you'll see the list of the city's outstanding debt and payments both in principal and interest for the upcoming year. I know Scott is also going to touch on this, so unless there's any particular questions, I'm going to pass over and let Scott deal with that. And seeing then, moving on to reimbursements, we have the budgeting for the for expenses that are well reimbursed throughout the city. And I will say that these numbers here are pre-COVID. As a couple of folks have said through this process, that's when this budget was put together. So you'll see reimbursements for park association, field lights in parks, and then police for reimbursements that might come in for extra duty fees and those kind of things. By budgeting those here, of course, that allows us to actually spend that money when it comes in. Moving on again, jumping throughout the book, we'll come to the non-salary part of IT, which is on page 33 of your budget book. There's a couple items you'll see here, and we worked hard to try to keep this level funded, and did not succeed in that, and we'll get to why in just a moment. But the budget includes a shift from prior year into next year of resources from hardware into software development. And the reason you're seeing that this year is because in FY20, we did a periodic replacement of the servers in the city, which is of course a very expensive item, but it brings us up to speed with servers that are technologically appropriate for our uses now. I will say we are taking the old servers that are now out of service and repurposing them as backup units to the city servers, so that those will be offsite at a different location, still connected to the network, and will allow us to have more immediate backup and at a lesser cost than what we have been doing. So we're making good use of those. You'll see on page 33 where we plan on putting this extra money that we're putting into I'm calling it software, excuse me, we call it here licenses. I use those terms interchangeably, so excuse me for that. We have a couple of initiatives under plan in the technology area. One that you don't see here because it's happening in the current year is upgrading the Public Works work order fixed asset management systems. And Wes spoke to you about that several weeks ago, moving away from what he refers to as his stubby pencil method of tracking work orders and making that, bring that electronically much more efficient and giving us a lot more data that we can use. That is in process now. When that is finished, our next effort is to help Dean with the automating of the streamlining of the application review and code enforcement, which still at this point is basically done by hand. And that does not make it convenient either for the staff or for the people who are submitting proposals and development proposals to the city. And I think that these systems will make the interaction with the planning and code functions much more user-friendly on all sides. So that's our big push for next year on that. We have a $5,000 increase proposed for IT security. And those are a couple things proposed for that. One is helping to improve our internal security. We have a good system in place for protecting our city data. You've seen, you read the news, and it's not uncommon for hackers to break into city networks or municipal networks. It happens across the country, and when that happens, it is very expensive to clean that and clean those systems back up again. We have our IT department has done a good job on training employees on how to recognize the kind of scams that let hackers into the system. And plus, we periodically run patches and such to protect our system. We're taking that to the next step in this year. We're proposing to do that by doing what's called multi-factor authentication, meaning to sign into the computer city network, you will not only need a password, but you'll need some kind of device. And I think if you work in the financial area, you'll see a lot of banks already have those in places or such. And so we're proposing that. We are proposing some replacing the external cameras here at City Hall, which they tell me used to be here. But right now our City Hall has a very good internal security system with the cameras in place. But really there are no cameras at all that point to outside the building. And I think that that is something that is needed. We had a situation actually just a few weeks ago where would have been helpful for somebody who came in and took out a lot of frustration on one of the windows in our front area. And we were not able to really identify who that was because of lack of cameras outside. So we want to fix that. Lastly, the reason you see the increase is that we have a $27,000 increase in internet costs. And that is a decision made by the vendor who provides those costs to, there was a period of time where the high-speed internet was provided to the city pretty much free of cost. There was not really an agreement that allowed for that. It was something that they were doing on their own. And we have been told that that will not be done in the future. And what you see here is the increase that kind of hit us at the last minute, but those are expenses to be paid for a service that we're already getting, just that we haven't been paying full cost for that. And I don't really have much to say about the finance side of things. I can put my welfare hat on unless there are any questions before we do that. Okay. Then turning to page 133 of the budget, you'll see the welfare department budget. And you'll see a significant decrease in that this year. And I'll say welfare has undergone quite a few changes in the past year. We've had the retirement of one long-term employee who has done a great job and is now out enjoying a well-earned retirement. And we've done some reshuffling of some folks there, brought on a new welfare technician who is really doing a bang-up job in getting things, keeping things organized. Throughout the year, we have also, as alluded to at previous meetings, have fine-tuned the administration of welfare and the welfare guidelines. And what that has allowed us to do is work more closely with our community partners to provide the assistance that we're legally required to provide in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that we are writing a check. And by that, we're leveraging the relationships with Lakes Region Mental Health, with CAP, and actually also with the Laconia Police Department to get assistance in a way that's a lot more cost effective for the taxpayers. And you're seeing that in the reduction in the city relief item from $70,000 to $40,000 proposed for next year, which is, as it looks now, to be probably about $8,000 higher than where will we end up this year. So the change is already in place. We are going to work hard to make sure it stays in place and that we can keep the city relief budget at a new normal of about the $40,000 level. And again, I'll say this is a pre-COVID number, and come Wednesday, the situation is going to change because the prohibition on evictions ends the day after tomorrow. I will also say that in relation to that, we don't know how that's going to affect this budget, but we have good reason to believe it's not going to affect us all that much because the state has really stepped up and made funds available to assist both renters and landlords in working through those situations through a program that is administered, going to be administered to the Community Action Program. So if folks come in here looking for rental assistance, of course, our first question will show us that you've gone to CAP and worked through that program. So we have reason to hope that things are not going to spike as much as we were at one time afraid they were going to. And unless there are any questions, I think we're all set.
Thank you, Glenn. Well done. Any questions for Finance Director Smith? Seeing none, we can move on. To 5F, which is Department Budget Presentation, the Administration with Scott Myers, City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors for your time tonight. I just want to touch base on two things in Glenn's world of finance and welfare. So on a question that Councilor Lippman has asked tonight, and at previous budget discussions, did we do anything, to help carry forward some of the unspent funds in welfare, knowing that some of these emergency orders for evictions and also for the shut off of utilities are expiring soon. So yes, when you did your carry forwards last week, we had dollars go in so that if we did get a spike, we aren't immediately draining next year's welfare budget with, higher than expected, applicants coming in. So again, we feel there's a good program as Glenn has described, but we did do some carry forward funds in the welfare area because there was this prohibition in place as well. And the other thing, just to thank Glenn, Glenn has done a great job on a number of fronts, including our buildings, our COVID, our social distancing, but on top of everything else that he's working on with closing the year end and other day-to-day operations, he has also been very much on top of the FEMA program and the Gopher program for our reimbursements. And from the get-go, had departments tracking those numbers, has hit the monthly target dates for submittals so that we are in the pipeline for getting the approvals. And it's not just the FEMA and the Gophers, there's a couple of other programs as well. So I really want to thank Glenn for going above and beyond and having a lot more on his plate than he shared with you tonight. With that said, I'm going to have you jump around your budget book quite a bit as well, but I think I've got mine in chronological numeric order. So let's start on page 9. And this basically covers all of the administration budget. So it's an office of 2 with Nancy Brown and myself. Also, has expenses in there, has our dues for the New Hampshire Municipal Association, for some conferences and associations I belong to, copiers, all that type of stuff. So nothing really new to report on page 9, other than just budgetary increases for the folks in that office. And I will kind of look around, and if I don't see any questions raised, we can always go back, but I will have you move to page 13, which is the capital budget. So some of the departments who've come before you have talked about it, but this is where all the capital is that we have in a cash form. So this is cash payments in our budget. Some of the projects here will look familiar to you in the fact that, the skate park improvements or the Weirs fire station remodel. We had talked about some funds being in that one-time revenue sharing dollars that came last year that we did end up moving over into the non-capital reserve account. So again, once we get a better sense, and I think I can share with you tonight on where some of our revenues are coming in, maybe take a little bit of the uncertainty out of the equation for you, there's an opportunity to revisit the non-cap reserve for some of these projects that you prioritize. So the biggie down here really is in the public works area: streets, sidewalks, bridge maintenance, guardrails, fencing, those types of things. That's the lion's share of the capital in the budget. You have the descriptions for all of that on the following pages, and we are not focusing on any projects to be bonded this year. As you know, we've done some significant bonding basically since, I'm going to say 2015, but even a couple of years prior to that with the Main Street Bridge and some of those improvements, the Weirs underground utilities, the fire station, a couple of $2.5 million bonds for major street projects, and then a $1 million bond, as is presented here to you, nothing being proposed this year. And we do understand that interest rates are at a low. We think they're going to stay there for a bit. And I'll talk about some refinancing that we're working on for some existing debt in just a minute or two. So I will move you on one page beyond there to page 26. This is a kind of a catch-all area that deals with administration, and we call it non-departmental. So you're going to find, I believe there are 4 places for Colonial Theater expense within this budget, and 2 of them are on this page right in the middle of that block there. So you can see that our lease payment to Belknap BDC to rent the theater once we take ownership of it and an occupancy of it on January 1st for a target date, we have budget in here $107,000 and change. So that's for 6 months of leasing the theater. So once we, as we have it from January to June 30th, and then the next budget will kick in, and we'll have to factor in an additional $107,000 for the lease. So around $215,000 is what our annual lease payment will be by the time we factor in getting caught up in the next budget cycle. Same thing with the Colonial Operations line item underneath that. We're factoring in $12,000 a month. And you can see the little footnote at the bottom for everything from electricity, heat, janitorial, phone, internet, those types of things. Again, half of it is built into this budget because we're paying the expenses for 6 months, but that also means that next year at this time, we need to fund another $72,000 and put that with a rent. It'll be, around $180,000 that has to go into next year's budget already in order to get that fully funded. So those are the big changes on page 26. I don't see any hands going, so we'll move to page 28. These are special items as they're referred to. So this budget is up around $13,000. The major changes are there was a $2,000 increase to the senior center budget. And there also is a $10,000 increase in our milfoil treatment going from $40,000 to $50,000. As Dean touched base, we've got some groups who help us out with Opeachy. There's another group that's doing some general fundraising for Paugus Bay. There's a limited pool of money that we get in state grants. It varies anywhere from maybe being around 20% of the project to maybe 35% of our given projects for a year, depending on what our scope of work is, how many other applicants there are, and how much money the state has available to that. So we think getting the milfoil budget up from 40 to 50 again as a focus on our water quality in lakes, and we actually contribute to 3 bodies of water. So not only in Paugus Bay and Opeachy, Winnisquam, there's been an organization there in recent years. So we're contributing to Winnisquam as well. They're all important. I'll turn you next to page 61, if you would, please. So this is the general fund revenues that Glenn mentioned I would be going over with you. And he's done a good job in breaking these out into a little bit more detail. In the past, they'd been lumped together in some bigger classifications or miscellaneous revenues for a few catch-all areas. So just to highlight a few things for you on page 61. So right up on the top, the 4th line down, you'll see other tax revenue, LRBP. That's Lakes Region Business Park, which is the industrial park, the commercial park that we share with Guilford. There's a split sharing in there after a certain dollar amount that goes back in to fund routine maintenance and investment in the park that gets split. So that was always kind of blended into a miscellaneous revenue. So we're showing that there, that above and beyond funds going into maintenance of the park, the city is receiving $25,000 in property taxes, some of that for construction that's in Laconia, some of that for construction that's in Guilford. So that's there. So going down to the next block, 2 down from there, starting with shared revenues and then rooms and meals tax. That's the $396,000 number, and then the $847,000 number. Both of those are key components of the state's 2-year budget. And those were concerns we had over how solid those numbers were going to be going through COVID, knowing that the state was going to be impacted by revenues, the uncertainty there. We've been assured several times by Governor Sununu that those numbers are solid and will be available to us. They were part of the 2-year budget, and there's no intent on his part to adjust those. Is it possible the legislature could come in and do something? Yes, but he was very solid on where he stood on that the municipalities were expecting that money, and it was going to be available to it. So we're pleased to hear that. A couple of lines down from there, the next big number is the $340,000 that's budgeted. That's the highway block grant, also known as the gas tax. So within a cost of a gallon of gas, then when everyone buys it, a certain amount is taxed, and of that, by statute, The state shares 12% of that revenue through a formula with local communities. So our share was projected to be $340,000 for this year. We're told that we probably should look for guidance to reduce that number by 7.5%. So if there's support and consensus based on the guidance from DRA and the state, we will be looking to put together some recommendations for the council to review at your July 13th meeting, and we'd be looking to reduce that line item by $25,000 just to reflect that guidance.
What line was that again? I'm sorry.
That is in the second block of the second chunk, highway block grants that we had targeted for $340,000. We would be looking to recommend that we reduce that to $315,000. And the way the state actually pays that out is they set a number and you get 30% of that in the first quarter, regardless of how their numbers are tracking. You get 30% in the second quarter, you get 20% in the third quarter, and then they finalize it up based on the actual in the fourth quarter. So the fourth quarter number could be higher or lower, but the first three numbers that the city receives are typically spot on. But again, guidance we would suggest reducing that by $25,000. In the next block of numbers, starting with motor vehicle permit fees, again, this is a very large revenue this year, budgeted at $3.1 million. And we, as I've talked over several meetings now, when we've looked at the financial and operational trends, we knew, based mainly on that $5 added municipal registration fee, that during the COVID, when people weren't registering vehicles in a timely manner, we were closed to the public, encouraging online. Some people not comfortable. 20-day plates got extended for an additional 2 months after their due date. So we knew that we were missing anywhere from approximately 70 to 300 vehicles. But unless all of those vehicles failed to be on the road at a certain time, we know we will catch up with those. And we've done it. So Glenn ran some numbers as of the close of business Friday. So it doesn't include today and tomorrow, which are the last 2 days of June. And I can tell you today was a very busy foot traffic day in the clerk's office. So June has really stepped up and made up from the shortfall that we saw, particularly in April, and to a lesser extent in May. And where we stand today, we are about $18,000. Where's my number? I think it's $18,000 is where we are under from hitting the $3.1 million number. And we have 2 June days left. And there's always some folks who don't hit the June deadline and will be in here in early July at some point to play catch up. So we feel very good, obviously, on not only hitting the $3.1 million for this year that we're wrapping up, but it'll be slightly ahead of that. Once we finalize that number, we'll come back and let you know whether we think the $3.2 million number is a real number for next year, or whether that might need some tweaking a little bit. Again, to be a little bit conservative on the numbers. We don't know how many people delayed purchasing a new vehicle, either because of challenges getting into the showroom or because of personal financial issues in their life with jobs and that type of stuff. And obviously, if you purchase a newer vehicle replacing an older vehicle, the registration dollars increase on that. So 3.2 could turn out to be a number we still stick with, but give us another week or so to kind of get into wrapping up June completely and into the first week of July, and we'll come back with some thoughts on that. But we are pleased to see that kind of self-corrected itself. And the whole fourth block of numbers, if you look down to the bottom in the bold of that section, you can see it's up about 200,000. Lion's share of that really was kicking in from solid waste, and not that we're collecting more in Laconia revenue, but again, it was one of those 6 months out of the year transactions. So we started taking, when Guilford opened its own transfer station, it basically is commercial haulers from Guilford who are coming into the transfer station now. It's not the individual homeowners coming in with their car with 2 bags of trash. So because we reduced the number of Guilford trips, it made sense for Laconia to bill the customer and collect the revenue and pay to dispose of it, which is still at a better than break-even scenario for us. So in the solid waste budget that Wes presented, you saw that cost went up because of that extra Guilford volume that we are taking, and we're just not swapping money with Guilford anymore. We're billing it out, we're collecting the revenue. So that's why you see that being the lion's share of the increase there. The very bottom section dealing with parking. I'm going to look at the middle line item. So you can see this year we budgeted 195,000 for parking. In next year's budget, we're only proposing 150. There's a reason for that. Is a year ago at this time, or 9 months ago, we were talking about, is there going to be a paid parking program implemented in the downtown area, or permit parking or kiosk, or how would that look? And we added some additional revenue into the parking fund, and we also added some additional expense into a contingency should we need to hire a parking enforcement officer. And Chief Canfield had given you some breakdowns of those numbers. So the council has made a determination that since we're not moving forward with any kind of a paid parking program downtown, not only did the 45,000 that we put in the budget to get a parking enforcement person on board for 6 months out of the year not go into the next year's budget, we took out that $45,000 in revenue. So we're back to a more normal revenue projection of 150. I think we should look to reduce that. And my recommendation is going to be to reduce it by $20,000. The reason is we're not sure on how busy of a summer and people traveling and coming up and doing that, number one. Second of all, Motorcycle Week usually happens in June. It didn't happen this year, so we got a little bit more revenue in parking because we didn't cover up the kiosks for those 9 or 10 days like we normally would. And it was a very nice stretch of weather at that point in June. So we got a little additional revenue in June, but that's in this fiscal year. If Motorcycle Week does occur in August, we will be covering the kiosks and we will lose 9 or 10 days, 8 days, whatever, somewhere in there. And at peak time in the summer, that's about a $2,000 a day revenue that we won't be generating. So combination of not knowing how many people will be traveling and knowing that we have the potential to lose 8 or 9 or 10 days of parking revenue, I think we ought to be a little bit more conservative on that number. And that would be a recommendation we will kind of package with you and bring it forward for full council vetting and discussion. But that's the logic behind that one. I'll stop there for a second before we continue on with revenues. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but flag me down if you want to stop. Seeing none, we'll turn to page. Sorry.
You almost got away. It may be that I'm just not aware, but revenues, public works seems to vary from 7,000 to 1,200,000 to 0. Can you explain?
Sure. So if you go back on 61 and you look at the middle of the page, and the easiest number to pick out is that big $1.207 million number. Everything that comes underneath there, starting with solid waste stickers, trash A, trash B, and trash C, all deal with different weight ranges when people go into the transfer station. So I believe I'm correct that trash A is for the small loads that come in at 100 pounds or less, and that's the flat $5 for somebody going in there.
Yep.
B is up to the next limit. It might be up to a ton, and then anything over the ton goes into C. So that's how we categorize our mom and pops, or maybe the back of the pickup truck or a dump truck type of thing.
Yep.
Versus the big commercial haulers. Also, that falls in under that one big number of the 1,200,000. You go a little bit further down, you'll see trash e-waste. That's the environmental waste type of things. So that could be freons or computer monitors or those types of things that we charge for people to dispose of. We go down a couple more lines. We have the coupons, otherwise known as dump stickers or dump passes, get blended into some of those. We have waste management, who under contract can do a small amount of trash pass through within that transfer station because they have the contract operated with us. But again, if they're bringing in trash that's not Laconia driven from our residents, it gets weighed and they get billed out. So that's not a huge number. And then you see the bulky items, and there was a big one in there that I missed, the demo, a solid waste demo. You can see that's about a 280,000. So the demolition debris of construction stuff is treated separately than municipal solid waste. So all of that together goes up to, at the end of the year, when we true it out, be that $1.2 million number. So it's kind of like a question that came up in a budget a couple of weeks ago. How come we don't break down vacation and personal days and longevity and stuff? We true that up after the fact, but that's the mother number, and then the rest of it will fall under it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Hopefully Wes isn't sitting at home watching and saying, you screwed up all the numbers. Those aren't the categories. Okay, so on page 62, the biggest change in the top section really is in the middle there, the third line down, the pilot for Taylor Home. They had a few new residences come online, and theirs is tied to an occupancy and a rental formula. So between the residences and the cost of units and stuff that was in a predetermined formula, you can see that's up about $37,000 in the Taylor Home pilot. And then this other piece of new revenue that we're getting is in this biggest chunk of columns. It's the area that's got no numbers to the left of it, the Colonial Debt Service. So this is interest that we are receiving on the city's loans to Belknap EDC. So the money that we put in, the 1.4 million in cash, and the 6.7 million that they are currently drawing down as needed once they've used their grant monies and stuff. They're drawing down the $6.7 million loan we closed on right at the end of December last year. So that's what that 162,000 reflects. So we get interest from them on the money that we've lent them. That'll go to help offset some of our lease costs when we rent the building back for them. It's about a $40,000 to $45,000 difference. So what they're paying us in interest, we're paying $45,000 more in lease payments beyond any of the operational cost. So that's a new revenue there. And then, as we had shared, and I think as the Finance Committee had recommended when we took on these bonds, that we should start to transfer some of the money out of the municipal transportation account. And that's that $5 fee that city collects when each vehicle gets registered. It needs to go into a separate account because that needs to be segregated and only used for transportation related projects. That could be roads, bridges, bike paths, pedestrian paths, but it's something to do with transportation. So we're pulling out 96,000 per the council's request to help support the bond payments on the $2.5 million bonds and the $1 million bonds and a bond. And that leads us into page 63, where you do see the debt there. And some of it is rolled in with some other bonds that we did, but the projects are there for the street improvements, starting in the 2018 General Street, 2019 General Street, and then we did Court Street in 2020. So a portion of each of those bonds, if not the entire bond, totals $6 million. And that's what that municipal transportation fund is, just being revenue that's in a reserve account. We're pulling it forward to help offset the bond cost so that we don't squeeze out other necessary spending in the city. Two additional Colonial Theater related components are on this page. The very top bundle of numbers, if you go to the bottom of it and go up one, you'll see Colonial Theater renovations. And then as a reference there, it's also in the downtown TIF account. And I'll get to that in a second. So if you go across, this is the $6.7 million loan. The balance due is still 6.7 because we just issued it in December. In last year's budget, when we make the payments, there's a partial year's principal and interest payment. So we paid $127,000, or will pay it in theory before the close of this fiscal year. And then next year, the principal jumps to $268 and the interest at around $40,000 because we're picking up the full year. So we've increased the amount of debt service included in this budget for the Colonial $6.7 million bond from $127,000 to $307,000. So that's when you start thinking about the pieces of money, the chunks of money that are in this budget at various places for the Colonial, it's not an insignificant amount in order to now be fitting them all in. So that's one component of that bond. The second one is 3/4 of the way down the page under the bold heading Downtown TIF bonds. And again, the Downtown TIF, if you go across, is picking up $210,000 of that bond payment. So collectively, we've got $517,000 a year that we make in bond payments, principal and interest, and that's how that's broken up. Okay. And again, we can come back to any of this if you get questions later on or in 2 weeks. So I'd have you turn to page 112 at this point. So this is one of the components within the city clerk's budget, which falls under administration. And I think Cheryl knew that we were talking about this tonight, so she said she was going to get out of Dodge. And so the long and short of it, this is our staff in the clerk's office. So you find the salaries, the operational, postage, copiers, records, the equipment that we need to purchase to issue dog licenses and to, issue motor vehicle registrations and those types of things. All of this happens within the clerk's budget. And again, total operational costs went from 161,000 salaries in operations up to 170,000. So we have a $9,000 increase in the clerk's budget. And we'll move along 2 pages. So we'll go up to 116. And the second component deal relating to the clerk's office in there is this is the elections. And again, this is one of those situations where we are budgeting 19,500 for elections this year. We have 2. We've got the primary in September. We've got the general election in November. And we will be truing the actual cost out by ward, depending on number of workers and if there's training and supervisor of the checklist and 17 other things I'm not thinking of right now, right, Stacy? But all that goes in there, and we break it down by ward after the facts once we know what the actual is. And then you can also see the postage printing notices. We're probably not going to use the outside services police because it appears that the schools will not be open on either of those days. I believe one day is the day after Labor Day is the primary, I believe. And there's just no school that day. And the other day, I believe they were using as a parent-teacher conference. So while there might be some adult activity in there, there won't be any students in the building on election day. And in the two school polling locations that we have, we typically have a police officer there if school is open in the day. So we're probably not going to be using that. I can guarantee you our postage number will be going up significantly because of the relaxing of the regulations on who can apply for absentee ballots, or just basically if you don't feel comfortable going in and voting, and I'm paraphrasing here, because of COVID, you don't need any other reason beside that and you can get an absentee ballot. So we think there will be a significant number of people doing that. That might be potentially one of those COVID related expenses, because if we exceed our postage line beyond what we budgeted and we can attribute it to COVID, which would be the case, there's opportunities for reimbursement. I don't have all the details of the programs available and when, that limitation on when expenses have to be incurred by runs out. But we are tracking that right now for a COVID expense for the number of transactions that we're doing by mail that are above and beyond our normal postage for mailing dog licenses, mailing motor vehicle registrations, doing those types of requests. Those are above and beyond our norm. So we are tracking. So there could be some postage reimbursement above and beyond. I just don't know what programs might be in place.
So I'm under the impression, Scott, that there are HAVA funds available. That the general, as I understand it, you'll know what it cost you in 2016 for absentee ballots, and the difference between what it cost you in 2016 and 2020 is probably reimbursable at something like 80%.
Yeah. I know, like with the Gophers, there's a certain date that's going to run out, but then the FEMA or other different programs. So we're monitoring, and that's good information to have. And like I say, Glenn has been great and been on top of that. So so that covers the city clerk's offices. We can go to page 175. Next.
Hold on, Councilor Lippman.
Thank you. In terms of poll workers and in terms of a contingency around needing to maybe use some city staff to cover some of the elections, if we have an attrition rate on people willing to be at the polls who are typical poll workers. Do we have any contingency around that?
Yeah, great question. And we are actively working on that on a couple of fronts. We just got very clear guidance from Governor Sununu on a call with the mayors and the managers last week when the question came up about would it be possible for communities to consolidate polling locations, because that would mean they could, maybe do it with 150% of staff as opposed to 200% of staff, staff it more than we would an ordinary ward, but maybe not doubling the size and doing that. I know Lebanon had that question in particular because of challenges with getting poll workers who aren't in an age or an underlying medical condition where they're comfortable being there. Governor Sununu said very clearly that absolutely not. That is the exact opposite of what should be happening, and that the Secretary of State's office concurred with that, that if anything, we ought to be opening more polling locations to make the crowds smaller, and that's just going to be a challenge finding the workers. We expect the amount of absentee ballots to be going up dramatically, and there is some what I believe is bipartisan legislation, and I forget the bill number right now, that is will allow for some activity to occur on absentee ballots in advance of the election day, so that you still would have to do some kind of a public setting. You could have observers there to listen, but I don't know the full extent, but somehow you would maybe be able to open up the envelopes and read the names out loud and enter them in, and then maybe the ballots get fetid the next day or something. I don't know. The specifics aren't there yet, but something along those lines to help alleviate. Once we knew that information about we were going to still need our 6 polling locations, I did have a conversation with the clerk and said, okay, how old do you have to be a poll worker? And the answer was 17. So I reached out to the superintendent of schools and said, who do you have for kids from National Honor Society, a civics class, a key club, or whatever? And he thought it was a great idea to get kids engaged in voting early and do that. So he was actually going to wait until the new high school principal came on board, where I believe Mr. Frederickson's last day is tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, and then connect with the new principal and try to get that rolling, and have the students go through someone and or get in touch with the city clerk to see if we can engage some of our youth and start to develop and cultivate our own younger generation poll workers, especially since schools closed on both those days. We've certainly been advertising it in the newsletter, and we can always use city staff if need be, and we will find a way to make it work, and we're trying to be creative.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Hammond.
Yes, Scott, I was just wondering, since you brought up the COVID and payments and all that, what are we seeing on being paid for some of the expenses we've had for COVID? Have we gotten anything back yet, or is that in the process? What's the status on reimbursement?
I'm going to let Glenn chime in and answer that because he's on the front line with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we have received our first GOFR payment from the state, and we're waiting for our first payment from FEMA. So we have gotten a little bit of money back so far, and board's in the works.
Do you have a rough idea, Glenn, of what the total expenses are up to now for that COVID situation?
No, I would have to get back to you on that. And the reason I say that is that I'm focusing on the period that ended on May 31st. So as far as reporting, we haven't gotten into June yet. So let me get those numbers together and I can get those to you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Glenn.
You're welcome.
And along those lines, I believe I'm correct in saying that any expenses the city has incurred at the Doobie is incurring or has incurred at the Doobie building is being paid directly through under Department of Safety, is my understanding, and therefore that should be a very routine payment from the state coming to us on that. And I don't think the numbers are huge. I think collectively, last time I checked in with Chief Biotti, there may have been a total of 12 or 15 people who have stayed in that facility, and I think a lot of them, people have been there one at a time. So it's been very lightly used, and there's been plenty of days that it hasn't been open at all. But that reimbursement is coming directly from the state, not through one of these other programs. Okay, so if we go on to page 175, Motorcycle Week. Again, we know Motorcycle Week didn't happen in June. So what was in our budget for this fiscal year that we're wrapping up
doesn't really come into play. We probably have a little bit of expense there for some legal trademark on the Laconia Motorcycle Week, various trademarks that we have. But obviously we didn't collect any revenue that we're going to book to a June event for boardwalk rentals or vendor fees or anything like that. We've had a few that we are reimbursing who aren't going to come in August. It's not a huge number, at least on the city spaces at this point. We don't know about other vendors, but certainly if someone is not coming and they've paid fees, we are going to be reimbursing people. It's a unfortunate event and certainly it'll be reimbursed. At the same time, though, we haven't picked up any significant expenses. So no overtime costs, no porta potty rentals and whatever. So the motorcycle week budget that's in the year we're wrapping up right now is really a wash. There's no revenue, there's no to speak of, there's no expense to speak of. Any pluses or minuses don't impact the general fund and they stay in that special revenue account. If we are going forward with motorcycle week for August, it means we have 2 motorcycle weeks coming up in next year's budget. And again, we're not going to have any history to go on by the time we adopt this budget on July 27th. We aren't going to have a firm handle on all the vendors who may be coming, on the crowd sizes. We will put in some estimates and some placeholders and make adjustments through police, fire, public works as things materialize. So, one way could be to do it. Do we say, well, let's assume it's going to be 50% of a normal motorcycle week cost, and therefore we budget in additional 50% on the revenue side, and we budget in additional 50% on the expense side as a placeholder. I mean, if you look at the very bottom of that page, you can see going back to the 15-16 actual in terms of net profit or loss to the enterprise fund. A loss of 3,000, a loss of 1,800, a loss of 8,000, a gain of 11,000, a loss of 16,000. It's been minimals to the plus or minus. So, and we do have some excess funds that are sitting in that reserve account. So if we needed to true something up, we would certainly bring that to the council's attention and have that conversation. But if we are having 2 motorcycle week events in the next fiscal year, we're going to have to put some placeholders in. And we had a meeting on that today. We really don't know what it's going to look like. We see parts of the country right now where things are ramping up and they're pulling back and they're closing down in certain areas of the reopening. So we'll be looking at the data. We'll be working obviously with the mayor and the council and the public and continuing this conversation. But in time for July 27th budget adoption, we may be looking at just adding some additional revenues there and some additional expense that we will true out kind of as we go along, so to speak, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll bring your attention next to page 181, the last page of the budget. This has the amounts that are going into the various TIF districts. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you focus on the downtown TIF, you'll see what expenses are going out of there. So $1 million and change is there right now. The downtown TIF account funds a portion of the 2015 bond payment, which were for the extra amenities on the Main Street Bridge project and phase 2 of the WOW Trail and some river walks. So that was their portion there. And you can see the $210,000 for the Colonial bond payment in there as well. So, that'll show you what's going to come out of that fund, and we're putting $238,000 into it. So we would expect, next year at this time that we'd have around $820,000 sitting in that account, but you can see it's going to take a little bit of a hit from its $1 million balance it has right now. The other one I want to bring to your attention was the Weirs Beach account. And again, for the underground utilities and the amenities above and beyond the project, we knew there was going to be a couple of years where the general fund was going to be carrying a balance due to it from the Weirs TIF because it wasn't going to have enough revenue. And we thought conservatively it would be a couple of years before the Weirs TIF would be able to cover its bond payment and then start to pay back the general fund. So right now you can see $108,000 is the bond payment. We've got $120,000 going in. So the Weirs TIF will be able to cover its payment, next year and have a little bit left to start paying back its $97,000 that it owes the general fund. And I think those are trending just as we had thought that it would be several years, and then it would at least be at a break even on the current year debt. And then it would start to pay the general fund back. So no surprises there, but I just wanted to highlight those and bring those to your attention. One other thing that I could have brought up on the bond page, and we can certainly go back and look at that again. That's page 61. I think Councilor Lippman had brought up the question a while back about can we look to refinance? I'm sorry, it's not page 61. It's, where do I want to be, Glenn? 63. Thank you. Page 63. Councilor Lippman had brought up, can we look at refinancing some of the debt? So Glenn has done an extensive review of our existing debt, both on the school side and the water department, on the city side. The lion's share of our debt, the older debt, all went through the municipal bond bank, and a lot of that has been refinanced one time already. So a lot of the debt going back in the 01, 02, 03 area, and then maybe even the 2010 and 11 area, we had done some refinancing with the bond bank. And again, the bond bank will pool together a lot of communities projects and issue bonds twice a year, very large bonds. The more recent debt that we've done has all been directly with local banking institutions. So about 2/3 of our debt is with the bond bank. There's already been a refinance that has occurred in past years, and there's really not another opportunity for them to refinance those. Some of the more recent debt from 2015 on, we have worked with the banks, and we've gotten some proposals that we're in the midst of finalizing. So Councilor Lippman, I'm going to suggest or ask you if we can hold a Finance Committee meeting following the regular meeting on the night of July 13th to review and look at where we're at, but collectively between maybe reducing the terms of, there's some bonds that have 16 years left. A few of the banks have said we'll bundle these into a 15-year bond. If there were some bonds that had 10 or 11 or 12 years, again, to make it need a 10-year bond seems to make sense. So we've got some proposals collectively for a good portion of our direct bank issued debt. That's going to reduce the term a little bit, which certainly helps, and is going to reduce our payments. Collectively, we think over the life of these 10 and 15-year bonds, it's going to be a savings probably somewhere at least $225,000. So a portion of that would need to calculate for this year's budget will come in. So it's not necessarily a huge number for fiscal year 21, but every little bit helps. And collectively, we think it's over $225,000 that could be refinanced on those bonds, and shortening some terms on it as well. So that would be our intent, is to look for a Finance Committee meeting to review the terms and the interest rates. And at this point, we don't believe that we need to hold any public hearings or have a full vote of the council, because we're not issuing new debt and we're not increasing payments. But we certainly wanted to have all of you aware and let the Finance Committee do their role of reviewing and approving the terms. So I'll stop there.
Mr. Mayor, I propose that we have that meeting as the manager suggested after the 13th regular meeting.
So it'll be added to the,
The regular
won't be on the agenda.
council meeting will adjourn, and then it'll be a meeting of the Finance Committee.
So there's no motion that's necessary.
No, just a acknowledgement that we'll hold it, and that will be.
Thank you, Councilor Lippman. Yes.
So I'm through the presentation, just to kind of walk through where we are at. So all departments have presented now. The plan would be to have on the agenda on the meeting of the 13th, an item for general budget discussion for the council to have. A few of these housekeeping items on the revenue and other areas that we've targeted tonight, if there's consensus, we would put those in a bundle for you to talk about and review, and whatever consensus there may come out of the meeting on the 13th for general budget discussion, we would create a resolution to substitute in the whole on anything that the council had consensus on. That's a long way of saying you can move all of these in with one motion and substitute, a handful or more of line items. That would not preclude any additional discussions from occurring that night or other individual proposals to have on the budget. That would just streamline it a little bit. And then the intent would be for adoption of the budget during the July 27th meeting, which is by charter the 4th. You can adopt by as late as the 4th Monday of the month, and that's how that date would fall.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, Councilor Lippman.
In terms of getting what's an updated amount of carry forwards and year-end balances, I think that would help facilitate the discussion a little bit further.
Sure. So we can certainly put together what was carry forward last week in line items and in capital, and then we can also put current balances and things like non-capital reserve. I think our impact fees are pretty much utilized at this point, except I believe when the school made the presentation of their budget, they indicated they were going to use the 60 or 70,000 that they had in school impact fees for a specific project next year. So we'll make it simple and one-stop shopping with whatever's carried forward and those reserve type of accounts.
You mentioned the schools. Just curious if there was an article in the Concord Monitor this past week, I believe, about carry forward situations of the schools. Do we have a feel for what that's going to look like? And is there going to be any additions to various reserve funds there?
Let me get that. I have not had that particular discussion with school administration, but certainly we'll have it the next day or so and get that to you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further requests for comments or questions, we can move on. Thank you very much.
I got.
Did I see it? Sorry, Bob. Go right ahead, Councilor.
You were talking about coming up with a list of the different contingencies. Will you be able to move money into the contingency from a few weeks ago or a month ago? Could you give us at the next meeting what that total is in that account, please?
Absolutely. So we'll give you the total that's there in from that contingency that we moved into the non-capital reserve. I believe we funded 2 projects. One was the sewer design for the Bond Beach bathhouse, and the other was the scale repairs that we thought were timely and necessary. And then the remainder of that 394 was moved into the non-cap reserve account. So we'll give you an updated number on that, along with, again, whatever impact fee accounts and the carry forwards that we did. So you get a sense of what we did along all those line items. So it's on one document for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Scott. That was very thorough and exceptional.
Thank you.
Moving on to 6A, which is a request to schedule 3 public hearings on July 13th, 2020 during the regular city council meeting. I will go through this and hopefully it doesn't take too long to get through this, but these are the 3 matters that we'd like to hear and discuss perhaps during the July 13, 2020 regular city council meeting. First, it's a proposed application to the Community Development Finance Authority for up to $500,000 in CDBG housing funds. The CDBG funds will be used for improvements to the Laconia Housing Authority's properties. The project includes 70 to 98 energy efficient and handicap accessible door replacement units with windows and other housing improvements at Sunrise Towers. Also a wall renovation between the upper and lower parking lots between Sunrise Towers, 25 Union Ave, and Sunrise House, 423 South Main Street, to enhance accessibility for all tenants, especially those with mobility issues, to allow them to access service amenities at both properties. The clients at the properties are of low and moderate income and with disabilities. Secondly, the residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan for this project. Temporary relocation may be necessitated by this project. If temporary relocation is required, tenants may be moved to a unit on site or to a local hotel. LHA will pay relocation costs. The project will follow the Uniform Relocation Act. And thirdly, the progress on Lakes Region Community Developers renovations at 8587 Elm Street, a 4-unit property. The unit needs a complete rehabilitation, and the project includes roofing, siding repairs, and replacement of a fire escape. The project is 70% complete. The CDBG funds are available to municipalities through the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. Up to $500,000 annually is available for economic development projects, up to $500,000 for public facility and housing projects, and up to $500,000 for emergency activities. Up to $12,000 is available per planning study grant. All projects must directly benefit a majority of low and moderate income persons. This report was submitted by City Clerk Cheryl Heber. Firstly, I'll be looking for a motion to schedule a public hearing on July 13th, 2020 during the regular City Council meeting regarding a proposed application to the Community Development Finance Authority for up to $500,000 in CDBG housing funds. The CDBG funds will be used for improvements to Laconia Housing Authority's properties. As I indicated, the project includes 70 to 98 energy efficient and handicap accessible door replacement units with windows and other housing improvements at Sunrise Towers. I'd look for a motion to schedule. So made by Councilor Hamel, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the deputy clerk to call the roll.
Councilor Cheney,
Yes.
Councilor Whitman,
Yes.
Councilor Haynes,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes.
and Councilor Felch.
Yes.
5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. The second motion we'll be looking for here is a move to schedule a public hearing on July 13th, 2020 during the regular City Council meeting regarding the residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan for this project. If temporary location is required, tenants may be moved to a unit on site or to a local hotel. LHA will pay relocation costs. The project will follow the Uniform Relocation Act. Be looking for a motion. So brought by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilor Cheney,
Yes.
Councilor Whitman,
Yes.
Councilor Haynes,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes.
and Councilor Felch.
Yes.
5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. And third and finally, be looking for a motion to schedule a public hearing on July 13th, 2020 during the regular City Council meeting regarding the progress on Lakes Region Community Developers renovation of 8587 Elm Street, a 4-unit property. This project, the unit needs a complete rehabilitation, and the project includes roofing, siding repairs, and the replacement of the fire escape. Currently, the project is 70% complete. We're looking for that motion. So brought by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilor Cheney,
Yes.
Councilor Whitman,
Yes.
Councilor Haynes,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes.
and Councilor Felch.
Yes.
5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Thank you very much for your patience, councilors. And I would like to move to adjourn tonight's meeting. I'm just declaring it adjourned. It's a declaration. All right, if there's any